They told me the station would be quiet, but I didn't expect the silence to feel like weight. Not the peaceful kind, the kind that settles in your bones, the kind you try to ignore. I'm Cameron Marlowe, 23, Earth Sciences graduate student at University of Oregon. I applied for this internship thinking I'd be tagging melt layers and logging wind speeds. Officially, we're here to monitor glacial degradation, study subsurface melt acceleration, and reestablish comms from old Cold War-era relay points along the interior fault line. Basically, we're mapping how fast the ice is giving way and whether anything's shifting beneath it. Instead, I got shipped to the ass end of the Arctic to babysit a Cold War-era station buried in a glacier. I'm the youngest here by at least a decade. Jules, our field technician, is ex-Navy and knows more about old antennas than anyone I've ever met. She's gruff, doesn't smile much, but she was the first to show me where the backup rations were without being asked. Dr. Anders, glaciologist, lead researcher, and an actual enigma, mostly stares at the horizon like he's waiting for something to emerge from it. Reyes, our logistics guy, is loud, sarcastic, and perpetually annoyed the satellite uplink doesn't support streaming football. The helicopter dropped us just after 1400. Wind howled as we offloaded crates. The rotor wash kicked up ice like dust, and I swear I couldn't feel my face 10 minutes in. No handshakes, no ceremony. Just steel doors groaning open and the muffled clank of boots in the entry tunnel. Thule 3 isn't much from the outside. Just a low dome, half buried in snow and frost-streaked panels. But inside, it feels preserved. Like someone hit pause in 1982. Old consoles, humming heaters, fluorescent lights that flicker awake like they're being stirred from a coma. We split up, claimed bunks. I ended up with the farthest corner room, closest to the main comms rack. Probably should have swapped with Jules. I think she was eyeing it. By 1700 hours, systems were online. Heating was stable, the geothermal node responsive. Jules checked the antenna feed. Reyes inventoried the food supplies twice and still grumbled. I was tasked with booting the thermal sensors along the western ridge. The rest of the night passed without incident. Reyes managed to get the kitchen systems running. Even found a crate of freeze-dried chili that didn't taste half bad once rehydrated. Jules spent most of the evening sorting tools in the workshop, muttering about cracked solder joints and lazy welds. I helped Anders calibrate the western ridge sensors before dinner. He didn't say much, but his notes were precise. After we ate, everyone drifted off. Reyes went to read, Jules passed out in the rec room chair with a heater pointed at her boots, and Anders retreated to his lab space, flipping through a thick notebook without once looking up. I spent an hour uploading the day's calibration data and watching the antenna readouts. Standard atmospheric scatter. No anomalies, no unusual spikes. Just the usual cold silence pressing up against the walls. Around 2030, I stepped outside to check the generator housing. The air was so still it felt artificial. The stars overhead were sharp, too sharp, like the sky had been cut open with a scalpel. I stood there longer than I meant to, just listening, but there was nothing. No wind, no creaking metal, no distant echo from the glacier. Just the kind of stillness that comes when the world forgets to breathe. I zipped my jacket, ran a systems check, and went back inside. First day, smooth enough. The next day, I woke up to Jules swearing at the hallway heater. Apparently, it had kicked on just loud enough to set off one of her migraines. Reyes brewed something that tasted like coffee but smelled like paint thinner. I drank it anyway. Our morning was uneventful. Jules checked the pressure in the geothermal line and patched a minor leak in the south corridor insulation. I shadowed Anders during a scan run, logging ice core readings and seismic pulse maps. The equipment's outdated but precise. Thule's sensors dig deeper than I expected, almost 300 meters into the glacial shelf. We've only just started cataloging it all. Anders barely talks, but when he does, it's clipped and efficient. He handed me a printout of old readings from 1991. The baseline seismic data from then looks clean. No anomalies, no movement. He tapped a recent overlay from last month. Same pattern, except for one spike. Artifact? I asked. Maybe, he said. That was it. He walked away and left me standing there with the pages. I showed them to Jules later. She glanced at the timestamp and said, could have been anything. Melt cavity collapse, grounding pulse, even equipment lag. Old gear lies. Reyes had a different take. Ghosts in the ice? Bet you a beer it's a Russian weather balloon. He was kidding, I think. I spent most of the afternoon in the signal room, logging ambient RF levels. Same scatter as yesterday, no spikes, no ghost echoes. I'm starting to get used to the rhythms here. The way the vents tick before the heat kicks in, the delay in the kitchen water tap, the way the snow outside looks solid until it crunches under your boots. Routine is good, and quiet isn't so bad when it's predictable. I logged the day, synced the data, and shut things down early. Everything's still business as usual. Morning came slower today. Outside, temps dipped into the negatives overnight, and frost crept in around the outer seal of the bunkroom window. I scraped it away with the corner of a report binder, watched the dawn smear across the ice shelf in long, pale stripes. Breakfast was quieter than usual. Jules was half asleep at the table with her boots off, ankles wrapped in heat packs. Reyes was nursing a burnt tongue from whatever passed for oatmeal in the freeze-dried rations. Anders didn't show up until mid-morning, muttered something about recalibrating the deep core pings, and disappeared down into the lab hatch. I spent the first few hours helping Jules troubleshoot a faulty uplink feed. The tower relays spike at irregular intervals, mostly just catching satellite drift and storm interference, but one of them, uplink node C, keeps rebooting like it's trying to handshake with something. Jules thinks it's a firmware loop. I'm less sure. We marked it for a physical check when the weather clears. Around noon, we did a team sweep of the West Ridge beacon. Snow was knee-deep and powder dry, the kind that hisses when you walk through it. Reyes complained the whole way out and back, but he carried the heavy pack without being asked. The beacon's readout was fine. No signs of tampering or degradation. Still, Anders lingered near the base longer than the rest of us, brushing snow away from the metal like he was looking for something specific. Everything check out? I asked him. He didn't answer at first, just stared off down the ridge. Then, finally, there used to be another relay out that way. Used to? Was decommissioned. But it should still be buried out there, if the maps are right. That was all he said. He turned and walked back toward the station without another word. I made a note of it. I've started doing that, making notes of the things he says when he thinks no one's paying attention. We returned by 1500. I logged temperatures, updated calibration charts, and helped Reyes unload the field kit. The wind kicked up later in the evening, hard enough to rattle the vents. Jules said it was nothing, just the weather reminding us who's in charge. By lights out, we were all back in quarters. Anders still hadn't re-emerged from the lower lab. Still quiet, still normal, still... April 5th, 2027. We were still rubbing sleep from our eyes when the anomaly hit. I'd gone into the signal room early. Coffee, logs, same routine. But something on the seismic monitor caught my eye. A single pulse on channel 3. Not a tremor, not static. Just one clean, precise blip. It came through at 04/1700 hours. I checked it 3 times. Source listed as Relay Node B. That's a problem. Relay Node B is buried, deactivated in 2006. The last maintenance log calls it inaccessible due to structural ice collapse. It's under 30 feet of frozen mass. No signal should be reaching or leaving it. I saved the readout and brought it to Jules. She leaned over it, frowned, and said, probably some backscatter garbage. Bounce effect, maybe solar flare interference. Except there wasn't a flare last night, I said. She grunted, then bad wiring. This place isn't exactly cutting edge. She's not wrong, but the waveform was clean. 3 pulses, equidistant. The second pulse was exactly double the amplitude of the others. It didn't look like interference. It looked like a pattern. I printed it and brought it to Anders. He didn't even blink. Just took the paper, folded it neatly, and slid it into his coat pocket, like he already knew it was coming. What do you make of it? I asked. He He didn't answer. Later, Reyes and I spent the afternoon comparing relay IDs with the archived signal table. Relay B isn't marked inactive like most of the others. It's flagged. Red tag, no details, no access notes, just a label, monitor only, no contact. I asked Jules if she'd ever seen that kind of designation. She said nothing at first, just lit a cigarette in the equipment bay and said, they used to black flag repeaters if they had interference loops that couldn't be scrubbed. Ghosts, basically. Feedback loops nobody could explain. Is that what this is? She looked away. I don't know. Dinner was quiet. Even Reyes, normally the loudest at the table, seemed distracted, watching the little LED tickers over the doorways, like he was waiting for one to blink. After lights out, I passed the signal board again. Channel 3 flickered just once. No alert, no audible cue. But it flickered, and I stayed there, staring at it, long after it went dark again. April 6th, 2027. Last night I couldn't sleep. It wasn't fear. It wasn't even discomfort. It was expectation. Like my body knew something I didn't. I stared at the ceiling for hours, listening to the low churn of the vents and the occasional rattle of frost dropping from the ceiling beams. I must have drifted off around 0300 because when I opened my eyes again, the hallway lights were on. And someone was talking. At first, I thought it was Reyes, but the voice was too soft, too far down the corridor. I got up, pulled on a sweatshirt, and cracked the bunk door. The voice wasn't coming from the team's quarters. It was coming from the stairwell, the one that leads to the buried sublevel. I followed it halfway, barefoot and quiet. No one was there. But the old relay panel at the landing was active, yellow light blinking slowly. I didn't touch it, just stood there, listening to nothing. And then 3 tones echoed up the stairwell. Same spacing, same pattern. I backed away. I didn't wake anyone. This morning I checked the logs. No power recorded in that corridor past 2300 hours. The sublevel shouldn't even have been drawing current. But it was. I brought it up to Jules. She shrugged and told me flatly, that stairwell runs cold. Always has. Anders didn't say anything. He just looked at me like he was already expecting the question. The signal on channel 3 hasn't come back, but now I'm listening. Really listening. And it's too quiet to trust. April 7th, 2027. Woke up to the scent of burnt metal. Jules was already in the main corridor, kneeling under an open floor panel. One of the backup converters shorted during the night. The station still had power, but part of the diagnostics console was offline. She said it must have surged sometime between 2 a.m. and 4 a.m. That's the exact window I heard the tones. We rotated duties by noon. I took weather and RF logs. Reyes climbed the access ladder to inspect the external tower after we caught a deviation in the western relay strength. Nothing obvious. No snow damage, no frost buckling. But when he came back down, he said something strange. The anchor bolts look clean, like new. They're not. No one's replaced anything since last September, and we haven't touched those towers since we got here. Anders took the printout from channel 3, the one with the triple pulse pattern, and disappeared again. I followed him down to the old archive room, but by the time I got there, the lights were off. I didn't go in. I spent the rest of the afternoon running analysis on the tone pattern. Converted to a waveform, slowed it by a factor of 12. The structure isn't natural. It's not weather. It's not hardware glitch. It's not even data corruption. It's deliberate. We're supposed to be the only signal out here, and yet something's replying. April 8th, 2027. The breakthrough came from a mistake. I was scanning through old recordings from the early 2000s, checking baseline frequencies against the pulse we'd picked up. Reyes walked in, half joking, that I was going to fry my brain if I didn't take a break, and elbowed the console by accident. That jolt shifted the playback sample by a few milliseconds, and the waveform aligned. It wasn't random. The sequence locked perfectly into our earlier channel 3 pulses, only now it carried structure. Jules helped reroute the playback through the analog buffer, where we saw the repeating loop, 4 tones, spaced like a countdown. Hidden under it, subharmonics, dense, mathematical, deliberate. Jules muttered, "That's not noise." We ran it against a signal reference sweep. Nothing modern matched. But then Anders pulled a dusty binder from the back of the equipment bay, flipped to a section labeled Long Wave Test Bands. He pointed. The frequencies matched a deprecated Cold War relay pattern used for encrypted on-site messaging. Low frequency, deep penetration, built to travel through ice and rock. We cleaned the signal. No hiss, no degradation. The carrier was stable, designed to wake up once modern hardware reached a certain sync threshold. A long dormant transmission, waiting to be heard. At 1614, we ran the pulse through the station's old translator archive, expecting gibberish. Instead, the terminal froze. Then, in plain block letters, "Thula, listen!" The room went still. Reyes backed away from the console. Jules just whispered, "What the hell does that mean?" Anders didn't speak. He just sat down and stared at the screen like it confirmed something he already knew. April 9th, 2027. We didn't sleep much. Jules had the signal recorder running on loop. I dug into the old field logs, looking for anything referencing this kind of behavior. There were a few mentions, vague, hushed reports from the 80s. The phrase static displacement kept surfacing, usually redacted. By mid-afternoon, we had it. Triangulation pointed not to the relay tower, but somewhere beneath Thule. Deep beneath. Jules ran some estimations. The signal wasn't originating from any known subsurface sensor. It was bouncing, cleanly, consistently, off something dense and hollow, roughly 90 meters below the sublevel. We brought it to Anders. He nodded and opened a locked storage case without a word. Inside, explosive gel packs and 2 old seismic bore stabilizers. "What are you doing?" Reyes asked. "Anders, if it's sealed, we can't just listen to it. We have to knock." Jules tried to talk him down. Said the melt wouldn't hold. Said we weren't equipped. He didn't care. By 1800, the charge was rigged and scheduled for the next afternoon. "Just a test," he said. "Just a small cavity breach." At 22:06, while reviewing relay playback, another message appeared. "Not transmitting, recording. April 10th, 2027. The helicopters arrived just before dawn, 2 of them. Black paint, no markings, no visible call signs. The snow kicked up hard enough to rattle the roof. By the time we got outside, 6 figures were already moving toward the station. Cold suits, visors, clipboards, no greetings. They entered without knocking, walked straight through the airlock and down into the main corridor like they already knew the layout. One of them, a taller man with a tight-cut beard and a Department of Energy patch stitched over blank black fabric, turned to Anders and simply said, "You're done." We were separated immediately. Reyes and Jules were moved into the storage bay. I got pulled into the old comms room where another man, younger, clean suit, no badge, sat with a small recorder and a thick folder marked Field Inquiry Classified. He didn't threaten me. He didn't explain much. He just asked for my logs, the printouts, my notebook, and he handed me a pen. Operational breach, level 7, sign and you leave. Simple. It wasn't a request. We signed. All of us. By 0700, we were in the air. Thule 3 disappeared beneath the clouds. The ice was unbroken again. I don't know what happened to the charges Anders rigged. I don't know if they ever detonated. I don't even know if we really triggered the signal, or if it was just waiting for us to confirm it existed. But I made a copy. The data, the audio, this log. If you're hearing this, it means they missed one.